This is the ultimate day of our two-day webinar. Welcome, Dr. Aloka Patel, and well, power to all women. It has been a very, very productive webinar where we have already had three mind-blowing talks. The first one by Professor Sanjay Mukherjee from Saurashtra University. The second one by Dr. Sharbani Mukherjee Banerjee from TDB College, Kazi Nazrul University. And then we had a talk last evening around this time by Professor Nandini Bhattacharjee from Bardhaman University. So now I welcome Dr. Aloka Patel to give a talk. And before that, on behalf of the Postgraduate Department of English, Berhampur University, I would request my colleague, Dr. Parabhadra Tripathi, to formally introduce Dr. Patel. Over to you, Dr. Tripathi. Thank you, Dr. Tripathi. Thank you, Dr. Tripathi. Aloka ma'am is a versatile scholar, and we could hear you, but then the voice was breaking at times. And she is a known figure in the academic world of English in Odisha, and her scholarship ranges over feminist literature to post-colonial to Canadian literature, and recently she is published an article on Salman Rushdie, and it will be very interesting to listen to you, ma'am. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shrutidas. I'm really a bit apprehensive for first thing, you being so kind. It's a privilege, and secondly, it's a second day, and I'm the last of the speakers after such scholars, such erudite scholars, and you said such mind-blowing lectures and talks that we heard. Indeed, I'm a bit apprehensive what I'm going to do today. With scholars like Professor Nandini Bhattacharya, and then after that it's my turn. So I'm a bit scared. Anyway, it's a privilege always to be invited on Women's Day on the occasion. Today is not certainly, it's the post-Women's Day. But this is on the occasion of the International Women's Day, I'm sure so. Although I know I was asked to actually speak on a Canadian author, Alice Munro, but since this Women's Day is mostly about empowering women. That's how the UN looks at it. It's one of its main issues. And so I thought, why not speak about power itself? And I'm not going to speak about women empowerment, but just to think about power and how it is visualized. So I will basically be raising some questions about our understanding of power as Shakti, as manifested in the image of Goddess Durga. And in the process, I shall point to some contradictions between representation of Shakti in the popular Durga Saptasati, Chandi that is, and the socially prescribed laws of what is virtuous and what is not for women. And then our willing submission to these edifying principles of a patriarchal order. Before that, let me make clear that at least I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. I don't read Sanskrit. Well, that may sound a bit contradictory, but then what I'm doing is looking at the text and then because it's so culturally popular and accepted in our part of Odisha. And for my purpose, I'm using the Durga Saptasati Chandi, edited and translated by Pandit Indravani Mishra and published by Dharma Grantha Store, Cuttack. And I've titled my talk as Envisioning Power and Virtue through Durga Saptasati. Okay, I think I can begin. So let me begin by asking the audience out there uh, to do something. I know it will interaction is not possible in this virtual mode, but I'm asking you nothing much, but to not to respond, just to imagine and think. So to think of a person, any person you think of as powerful. I hope you've done it. Yes. Try to just think of someone, anyone, people you know, and then think of a woman you think of as powerful. It may be in your family or outside or some politician, anyone. So just imagine that. And then take a look. Give me just one moment. I want to share an image. So maybe take just a moment. One second, something's wrong. Can you see this image? Is this image visible?
Yes.
Yes. So what I wanted was for you to think of. One second. One second. Losing it. Okay. Now, just to take, I hope all of you have taken a look at that image and to ask, when you thought of the powerful woman, was it this kind of an image that ever came to your mind? And do we think of her as powerful at all? Well, the answer might be yes, it might be no. It might be like I imagine her to be pitiable. She is an everyday image, the stereotype of a woman we see in our families, in our immediate neighborhood. Perhaps we remember our mothers who we envision as hardworking and chaste and, nurturing, kind, all those things. Now, to take a look at another image. Is this visible? Can you see another image?
Yes.
Yeah. So now to look at this picture. Is this the picture of a powerful woman? Would we imagine her to be so? And this is actually, if you have already recognized it, the poster of Satyajit Ray's 1960 movie Devi, a movie about the tragic tale of a woman called Doyamoi, who had been imagined to be an incarnation of goddess Kali by her father in law. Now, to come to the question, what makes a person, I would say, powerful? Is it the possession of these nurturing qualities that the first image was there, and the attribute of and the ability of performing multiple tasks at a time? And do you think the first image of the woman shares any attribute with the great goddess Durga? Because often we have heard in meetings like this, which address women, Nari Shakti Rupa, say Janani, Jaya, Shrishtikota, Sikni Samhar Kare, etc., etc. So many things have been said. Now, this is a question particularly to women out there. Have you ever really felt capable of all that? Or is it possible for us to be superhuman and perform miracles like a goddess, as Kali Kinkar, that is Doyamoi's father in law, imagines? We remember the sad and isolated life of Doyamai and her insanity after the death of her nephew that happens in the movie, who she could not save. So, with this, let's think of a moment in our life when we felt powerful. When means it can be any one of us, men or women, Was it a time when we discovered some inner strength to reach farther than we had ever achieved and achieve something actually? A time when we found the courage to try something new, to choose to live life on our terms. Dayamai could possibly have saved herself and her nephew had she had the courage to run away from her conservative family to Kolkata. So, how often and how many women can, after all, afford this inner strength or courage without raising eyebrows or risking social stigma? So, to take a look at the image of goddess Durga, that's the image of goddess Durga that I've chosen. These pictures, images are taken and copied from websites, so they are common images. So, this is goddess Durga. And as we see, she is the emblem of Shakti. And if you look at her carefully, you notice that she is fair, beautiful, very good looking, and at peace with herself. An image we're familiar with, aren't we, from our childhood. And then I would want this from all of you, to take a closer look at Mahisasura. Do you think he looks repentant or as if he's violent, a sinner, ready, all set, all posed to attack the goddess or something like that? Or does he even look vanquished? What is he after all, human or animal? The monster, an obverse, I would say, of the feminine beauty, to me he looks enchanted, charmed and in awe and admiration of this goddess. I think, which in fact he is. And the goddess, her arms indicate her various powers, in this case, the weapons and emblems that the gods had given to her. So, do we imagine our mothers as these Dasabhuja? Or do we at all identify, or I would say, well, certainly not. So, do we identify more with the half human, half beast monster, the dark counterpart of idealized femininity? Well, the monster no doubt represents male fear of femininity, but I believe it equally also represents women's fear of the ideals that this goddess, this Devi represents, and which women are expected to approximate. And all the women are made to believe that their devis. My paper is intended towards this to review. I think it's not me that I'm talking for the first time. Other feminist scholars have done it. So we must learn to review this image of Shakti or power before we can imagine ourselves or any woman to be made in the image of Durga. And to say, well, Foucault was being referred to yesterday in, I think, Dr. Sharbani Mukherjee's lecture. He was not certainly the first to reveal this association of knowledge with power. Uh, for us, the source of knowledge, or the source of power is knowledge, is ancient knowledge. And this power is for us in Shakti. Well, literally translated, Shakti would be energy, and the goddess as Shakti has been presented to us as an embodiment of knowledge. And I won't enter into, well, knowledge could have numerous definitions, and I'm not going into any discussion about that. Let's come to the goddess then. And we know that worship and meditation of this goddess is considered a process of self inquiry or a means of acquiring knowledge. And so every time we invoke the goddess, we invoke knowledge through the shlokas. And as represented in the Saptasati, this power or knowledge is also identified ironically with wealth, fame, and even beauty. People pray to the goddess for, it's like Vidyavantam, Yashasvantam, Lakshmivantam, Chamanguru, Rupam Dehi, Jayam Dehi, Yasho Dehi, Visho Dehi. The worship of this Shakti supposed to break down limitations of mind and body and reveals knowledge, brings material pleasures, assures eternal bliss, all that. Now, what point out, however, is that these rewards are reaped, and I deliberately use the term reaped to remind us of goddess worship as a fertility cult, fertility rite, through eulogizing and veneration of the sexualized female body of the goddess in a patriarchal society, and a society that has always considered sex as taboo and any discourse on sex as anathema, particularly to women. And restrained sexual behavior is the prescribed moral behavior. Take, for example, our model of ideal female behavior, and even Chanakya notes, or perhaps borrowing from Rakti Shastra. I must admit, I haven't read either of them, but these are well known facts in our society. The demure Padmini, the passive and docile goddess seated on a lotus. Well, certainly not the dark goddess Kali. She will not be our ideal. It's for the women. I will elaborate upon my understanding of Saptasati, Chandi, the hymn to the goddess, which forms the basis of Durga Puja in our part of the country, to illustrate the claim that we Indians make to a tradition that has been respectful of women by identifying her with Devi Durga. Well, this identification, I think, is not only oppressive for thinking women, but is at the same time an expression of contradictions between the power or potency of the goddess as contained in her sexual behavior and the reality of the stigma that such power apprehends if and when adopted by women. Now, women in India are expected to be Devi, chaste, virgin, sati, or otherwise they are sinners. And, I think yesterday Dr. Sanjay Mukherjee also referred to Saint John. So it's the same even in the West. Saint John, who was burned for heresy, but after 5 centuries she was declared a saint. So it's not very different. Let's to come to our part. Well, we talked of the Devi, but the story is not so very different for the man either. He is the Minotaur, Mahisasura, the embodiment of all evil and animal instincts. So, this binary between the devil and the Devi, it however emphasizes the contrary principles that guide the male and the female. Um, Whereas the man, like Mahisashura, shuttles between human identity and his animal nature, caught as it is within the buffalo's body, the human aspect is denied, uh, uh, not only to the man but also to the woman. So, whereas for the man, he's trapped between this the animal and the beast and the human. But whereas for women, she has to be either that super powerful goddess, the Devi, or she is nothing at all. No human part there. So patriarchal standards that are laid down for women deny them their sexuality and material physical urges as much as worship of the Devi and her potency has the ability to desexualize the male. And you can find examples in Greco-Roman myths like Aphrodite, the fertility goddess of love and beauty, who is born upon the sacrifice of Uranus. Nearer home, you have the story of Bankim Chandra's Anand Mat, where a group of sannyasis who worship an image of Mother India as a goddess must live a life of denial. So Mahisasura was invincible. Only a beautiful woman could defeat him. Devi Durga exploits her feminine charm and sexuality and ultimately slays this demon to restore peace and prosperity to the universe. Greco-Roman and other Asiatic mythologies also make references to fertility rites such as that of Cybele, Cyriadia, and Isis. The goddess slays a minotaur and brings life and lost fertility back to earth. The male becomes symbolic of animal instincts, and he is sacrificed at the altar of the goddess so that life and peace is restored. And these myths about the sacrifice of the male to a great goddess testify to I want to emphasize on this, that this sacrifice, where in myths, testify to the male fear of female sexuality that still exists. Consider, for example, Birkin's fear of Magna Mater and Aphrodite as the feminine principle in Lawrence's novel Women in Love. Residues of such male fear still continue to prevail even in our times, but not in the West, perhaps, where they do not anymore practice these older religions. But in India, where an agricultural populace is heavily dependent on fertility of the soil, we ritually worship a power that we believe nurtures, protects, and brings the seed of fruition. And there are some quotations like A.S. Altekar, I'm quoting from him, who says that the apotheosis of the mother has reached a greater height in India than elsewhere. This cult of goddess worship, iconically represented in mother goddess figures, is wanted as proof of women's high status in our society. The goddess is considered to be the dynamic energy that is embodied in all women and is responsible for creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe. I think I wanted to give references of feminists who have earlier criticized identification of Indian women with mother goddesses, like Kamala Ganesh. And well, she says that Kamala Ganesh says that the idea of Shakti can be used to empower Indian women to resist patriarchy. On the other hand, there are others like Sukumari Bhattacharjee and Gitanjali Singh Chadda who observe that sacralization of motherhood is inherently problematic. And you have the example in Mahashweta Devi's short story Stanadaini, which is a indictment of the glorification of this abstract. We should understand that the idea of Durga as mother goddess is deeply sexual. We may start from the idol itself. The goddess is fair-skinned and hence considered beautiful and embodies female strength as sexual superiority. She is shown as playing a demonic half man, half animal. Girls and women in modern day India, where a high female infanticide rate still exists. In the Devi Puranas, Durga is the warrior manifestation of goddess Adishakti. The contradiction between the Vedic goddess Aditi and her Shakta counterpart is quite apparent, as shown. Rita Banerjee wrote a book called Sex and Power in 2009, where she discusses this contradiction between the Vedic goddesses who were regarded as passive and inert, and the Shaktas who worship the female god as personification of sexual power. I've told this earlier that Durga means the invincible one. But wherein lies this power of her invincibility? Apparently, as Saptasati illustrates, in her sexuality. Well, we all, perhaps, I assume that we all know who Durga is. And Saptasati portrays the exploits of Durga. I'm just telling it for the benefit of those who don't have a fair idea of the frame, the structure of the Saptasati. It portrays the exploits of Durga in 13 chapters, which are called Adhyayas, narrated in 700 shlokas contained in 3 parts or charitas. This narrative is set, the narrative of Durga is set within a frame narrative about a benevolent patriarch called Suratha, who lost his country and his property to his enemies. His ministers and kinsmen also betrayed him, and Suratha, in his sorrow, wanders into the forest where he meets a merchant named Samadhi, who had also been betrayed by his own kinsmen, his wife, his sons. So both of them seek refuge in the ashram of Rishi Medha. And they're puzzled that although abandoned by family and friends, how is it that they are attached to their kinsfolk? They still are attached, you can't forget them. So they seek an answer from Rishi Medha, who explains that all life, that is all universe, cosmos, labors under an illusion created by goddess Mahamaya. And the goddess deludes all into a life of moha or infatuation. Medharishi goes on to narrate her, means the goddess's exploits in 3 episodes or charitas, and they reveal the 3 aspects of the goddess. Among the 3 forms that Durga takes to destroy evil, Saptasati talks first of Yogamaya. Brahma is threatened by the asuras Madhu and Kaitava, who have emerged from the ears of Vishnu, while Vishnu is in Ananta Yoga Nidra. Brahma prays to Yogamaya, who resides, must note this, that the goddess resides in the eyes of Vishnu, so that Brahma prays that she might charm, charm Vishnu as well as the asuras, charm in order to destroy the asuras who threaten to kill him. It's I'm citing from the text, Mohayetu Durhadharsha Basura Madhukaitavu Prabodhancha Jagat Swami Niyatam Achyuto Lagu Bodhascha Kriyata Masyahantu Metu, etc. Mahasura. So Yogamaya, this incomparably beautiful Tamasi Shakti is propitiated with the prayer of Vishnu, with the prayer of Brahma. She now surfaces from the supine body of Vishnu to stir him with energy to kill the demons. This goddess is, in the invocation of Brahma, emblematic also of Mahavidya, Mahamaya, Mahamedha, Mahasmriti, all those, and of knowledge, wealth, strength, memory, etc. And charmed or demohita by her beauty, as the text says, or by the Tamasi Shakti, the Asura duo willingly surrender to be killed at the hands of Vishnu. And they grant Vishnu a boon. And they say, Mahamaya Bimohito Uktabanto Baro Asmatto Kriyatamiti Keshava. So they grant Vishnu a boon, and the god asks for them to be slain at his hands. And the same, he also says, Madhu Kaitava Nashartha Mohito Cha Tadathaya. That the emphasis, as we notice, is on these terms, mohito or vimohito. And contradictory to her willingness and ability to seduce the demons to their death, this goddess also embodies the opposite ideals of lajja, pushti, tushti, shanti, kshanti. The qualities of shame, health, happiness, peace, and forgiveness in that order. If you notice, I'm pointing to the contradictions. The prayers of Brahma, it is believed that can charm and keep control of the environment around us. In the second section, the invocation is to the form that we generally worship in the pandals during Durga Puja as Mahisasura Mardini. This goddess, born of the collective energies of all gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh, and other devatas, face being made from the light of Mahadev, arms from Vishnu. She is bright, fair in the image of Mahalakshmi. Decked with weapons and ornaments gifted by the gods, the gods have prayed to her to save them from Mahisasura. So with all those ornaments, she cackles out in a great echoing laughter, Attatahasa it says, to fight the demon Mahisasura. Sammanita Nanato Chaiva Sattahasam. And although in the Odia imagination, Mahalakshmi is the woman's ideal, this is a Chandi Rupa Lakshmi, not soft-spoken, not docile or modest, far from the standard notion of a desirable woman. She is an angry woman who howls in rage against her enemy, and she is more like, we would say, more like a grotesque caricature of a morally transgressive woman who would very likely be thrown into an asylum in real life if she did that. Sandra Gilbert and Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gruber refer to in their classic Mad Woman in the Attic. So after a long battle, finally inebriated, the goddess is inebriated, drunk with alcohol, she screeches out, Garja Garj Kshanamura, Madhu Javakati Vahya. So she sets her foot on Mahishasura's neck and attacks his heart with her trident. During the battle, Mahisasura had also attacked the Devi in various animal forms such as buffalo, lion, etc., elephant also, before she could finally injure him. His various animal forms would have been popularly understood as representing the animal nature or lust of man. And the goddess, surprisingly, if you just try to imagine a real life situation like that, the goddess literally leaps, hardly an image of a virtuous woman, literally leaps off her lion unto the Asura and throttles him with her feet. Severely injured, well, the text does not say mortally injured, as the Asura emerges. So the Asura emerges in human form from its animal body and he's stunned, stambhibhuta, dumbstruck by the goddess's beauty. In this unconscious state, uh, the goddess beheads him. So, in other words, the Devi literally charms, transfixes, and then slays him. The last section informs of the exploits of Mahamaya, the virgin goddess. So, Mahamaya is a virgin goddess who declares that she would marry only someone who would defeat her at war and squash her ego. Like the other two goddesses, she too is a stunning beauty. She first draws the attention of Chanda and Munda, who report to Asuras Sumbha and Nishumba of the Himalayan beauty, Ambika. Ambika or Mahamaya receives proposals of marriage from Asuras Sumbha and Nishumba, but she ultimately kills them before killing their Senapati Dhumralochan and then Chanda and Munda, and she proves invincible. That's the basic story. And mythical characters have, as we know, have always represented some timeless quality of human nature or society. And these characteristics and their stories have therefore, because they represent reality, they've survived into ours. The pity is that when it comes to present the mythical goddesses as representing women's nature in its totality, some of these qualities are proclaimed to be undesirable because uncontainable in a patriarchal setup. The last but one chapter before Borapradhan. Every text ends with this Borapradhan, religious text. And so by evoking the Devi as a creator of the universe, she is, as well as the one who keeps the cosmos mohachanna, immersed in lust and desires. Taye tanmohyate vishwam, saiva vishwam prasuyate. So she is the creator, she is the destroyer, she is the Mahamari Swarupaya. The prayers and shlokas in chapter 4 also accordingly, the second section describe goddess Lakshmi as, they describe her as Shri or Sampada Rupini, Buddhi Rupini, Shraddha Rupini, Lajja Rupini. But she is also described as Bipadadaini, which we conveniently forget, as a Lakshmi. She unites, therefore, both these principles, Lakshmi and Alakshmi, prosperity and poverty. Apart from her potency and superhuman exploits, the goddess is the perfect representation of the human in the woman, embodying both the brighter as well as the darker nature of her reality. We must note that even in the last section, Chanda and Munda are slain not by the beautiful Ambika, but by another terrible form of the Devi, the terrible Kali or Chamunda. Kali actually drinks the blood, you might imagine a vampire, of one of the Asuras, Raktabija, to prevent it from spilling onto the ground to breed new Asuras. Now, the tragedy is that a patriarchal setup, at least in Odia society, has space only for the Lakshmi Mantra, not for her alternate self or Lakshmi. Has space for Ambika, not Chamunda. And what worshippers cherish in Durga are our submission, beauty and chastity in that order, in the three forms that demolish the demons. What is ironical, however, is the overtly sexual implication of the struggle between the divine and the devil. The problem of feminine sexuality in a conservative society like ours is brought to terms by deifying the sexualized female body. As a consequence, the goddesses embody contradictory values or virtues. The contrast between the real and the mythical becomes apparent when that which in the goddess is worshipped as Shakti is condemned as transgressive in women. And that which in Mahakali is seen as a protective shield is defined at best as grotesque and at worst as hysteria. And so I gave you the example of the vampire. Aren't preaching and practice therefore poles apart? Whereas Durga exploited her sexuality to become the goddess that she is worshipped as. Women in traditional societies are taught to suppress and deny their even their bodies so that they become invisible as sexual beings. I just wanted to ask: is it possible for us to ignore the fact um, that our body is our destiny? We are not supposed to be seen at particular places at particular times. We must make ourselves invisible. You can't go out in the midnight, you can't go to certain places. What fate awaits women who cannot imbibe or is not born with the qualities of a Padmini, Chitrani, or Sankhini, but must have the physical characteristics of the Hastini type? Such women must by default be abandoned to unacknowledged oblivion, unaccepted. Although mythology or religious texts may take note of them, a patriarchal tradition has no space for the sexually deviant women. Even in the West, can I continue for some time or should we stop?
Well, it's very interesting. So I don't think anybody would want you to stop midway. Please continue.
Okay, just a few more minutes. So I was talking about the sexually deviant women, and that was about the the Devi. Uh, in the Indian context, even in the West, Eden, was could accept only Eve, not Lilith. Eve was created, as we all know, from a bone of Adam. But what happened to the woman in Genesis? Sorry, somewhere. Just a moment. So I was asking what happened to the woman in Genesis 1, chapter 1, verse 27. The woman who was created from the same clay as Adam on the sixth day of creation. I'm quoting from the Bible. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So this was on the sixth day. And Eve was nowhere in sight. There is already a woman there who is never referred to in the later Bibles. So Lilith was considered to be the first wife, as the Jewish legend goes, of Adam, had to leave Eden because of her wantonness. A rebel, she refused to be subservient to Adam or to return to Eden. But this woman finds no mention in common versions of the Bible, such as the King James or New International Bible. She has been metamorphosed into a dangerous demon, some kind of a vampire, sexually wanton, and who steals babies in the darkness of the night. Greco-Roman mythology, when I talk of, that's what the Greco-Roman mythology has done, turned her into a vampire. And but there have been sympathetic versions, I told you about Satyajit Ray's Devi, where that movie in the 1960s, I guess. Here he is a sympathetic look at the conservative middle class family who bestows this divinity onto the woman, deifying her and the tragedy that follows. You have, in the West, you have Goethe's example of Faust, where Mephistopheles warns Faust about Lilith. When Faust asks Lilith, who's that? And Mephistopheles replies, Adam's wife is first. Beware of her. Her beauty's one boast is her dangerous hair. Excuse me. So it's Goethe who shows some sympathy for Lilith's psychology when he makes her recount the days spent in Eden. She says, like, ever since the days of Eden, apples have been man's desire. How overjoyed I am to think, sir, apples grow too in my garden. Well, it's not difficult to conclude that while financial equality between men and women may not be so far fetched an idea, social and cultural ideologies, at least, have not permitted equality. Like Bertha, women who do not abide the socially sanctioned behavior must be confined to the attic of Rochester's mansion or pathologized as mad. Women need to be respected. That's how I would like to conclude, that they must be respected for what they are as human beings. As human beings with their natural urges, even with material desires, you can't be a sannyasi all the time. Not for what they are not or cannot be. A Durga, invincible in beauty as Lakshmi, invincible in knowledge as Saraswati, or even in physical prowess as Mahakala. And then, contrary to these superpowers, we are expected to be modest, self denying, and meek. It is like Shambhasura foolishly warning the Shakti, the embodiment of all knowledge, beauty. And Shakti is the embodiment of knowledge, beauty, and physical strength. That is in chapter 10, where Shambhasura warns the goddess, Bala Bale Padushte, Twang Ma Durge Garbha Mavaha, Anyasam Balamashritya Yudhya Se Marim. So it's foolish. On one hand, you bestow this uh, Shakti and power onto her. You imagine her to be all powerful, uh, so charming, enticing. And then on the other hand, you ask her not to be proud, to be modest. Only when a woman is respected for what she is, as human, and enjoys the right to make the choice of her life. I gave you the example of Devi. Can a woman be said to enjoy power? Otherwise, she is only the surrogate mother of, I was talking of Mahashwara Devi's Tanadaini, abused sexually, psychologically, and financially, both at home and in public. So, like any other mythology, Saptasati symbolically highlights the real through the improbable events and situations. But patriarchy ironically overlays the supernatural attributes of a goddess onto the woman, giving her a false sense of pride in potency. We must remember that as a strategy of subjugation through appreciation, patriarchal oppression works best with the consent of women. When women feel flattered by an imaginary, idealized, and deified self. I think I should stop there. That's exactly well. That's what I wanted to say. That we must be warned against this kind of this love for appreciation and love for deification. So thank you all. I thank you for the patient hearing. I think I should stop sharing this one second.